it's kind of about our comprehensive plan and what we're doing. And he was asking about a picture. Do you have, and would you let us give them a picture of the comprehensive plan citizen committee? I think you may have come to one of their meetings, but I don't know if you got a picture or not.
I don't think
you don't think you have one.
Who are some of the members again?
Are we live?
I never know.
Connie Anderson. I mean, there's a bunch of different people.
No, I don't think I ever. I can check, but I don't think I ever on that.
I just wasn't sure. Okay, well, I hate to give them a picture of some random.
But it's hard to put people together.
No, I think he's finishing the article this week. I think their press is this week. So.
Oh, well, that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. I haven't seen the article yet, but
A little bit about it.
we'll find out. I'm sure
Shouldn't say it's
positive.
good right now.
They only do positive articles,
Yeah.
so
No, I'm sorry. I don't think I ever took that.
that's
photo.
okay. Not a big deal.
Don't ever go look, but it'd be too obvious.
Does the concert start at 7:30?
Yeah.
Too much, it's just-
The view of the new piano. The new grand piano.
Yeah.
Why the heck is that so loud?
High school band concert.
Yeah, the junior and senior high band.
One more lesson, they'll do it.
He's not even gonna take that, he's already done.
Think so?
Yes.
I would bet on it. I don't know.
There's Jerry. Better turn my phone on.
I don't think he's office recording with her.
There's a bubble around the fender, so I can look at it. They pressure wash it.
And I don't know how I can do
The spring.
Every time I see him, he's doing something wrong.
Your
Hi,
sister
Jerry.
No, I just want to put stuff there.
Yeah.
keeps texting me.
I don't think he's.
I don't know where George is.
Well, if you keep these surfaces are like this.
I call it.
It's gonna be 13.
I don't.
The guy who knows how to
Oh, let's not go there yet.
he's coaching somebody.
He's coaching in Cleveland.
That's the guy who needs back.
That's what he likes to hear.
That's the guy who needs back.
Did you get your internet?
It's gonna be ugly.
Oh, as a
Where's that come from?
I don't mind. I mean, I spent a lot of years wearing suits and ties and stuff like this, so I'm not
From Avon, Minnesota.
to be honest.
I would never be on this if we had a dress,
How did he slip away?
especially if you would say the word dress. I have, oh gosh.
You don't wear dress, Tracy?
I just thought.
I don't think I wear anything but dresses all summer long.
Yeah, that's true. Diane does wear a lot of summer.
They don't get any more comfortable.
Saturday, just blah, blah,
I don't know. I can't.
She begs to differ, I take from that look.
I can't speak for him or what he's doing, but.
Okay, y'all ready? Okay, we will call to order the Tracy City Council meeting for November 8th. I stand to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We were in sync.
Do we have any additions or subtractions to the agenda?
No, Mayor?
I have one, Pam. I'd like to present an update on the community foundation.
You want to do that now? Oh, on here?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
just a
Like,
short
you want to
agenda.
do that under the the mayor council communication? or-
Whichever you wish.
Yeah, that works
We can
fine.
do it there if that's
All right.
okay.
Okay, very good.
Glad you said that, because as long as you're gonna do an update, I was gonna mention it so the public could hear that we're looking for volunteers to be on the board. So you might wanna just do that all at the same time, or you want me to say something?
Yeah, you can add that.
Okay.
What I guess.
Okay,
Motion to approve is amended.
Second.
first and second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Davey, you wanna do your thing?
Motion to approve the October 25th and November 2nd council minutes, approve municipal accounts payable and payroll without breakthrough beverage, approve the park board minutes, and approve the CCWG minutes from the 14th and the 2nd.
Second.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Landite,
Aye.
Koopman,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Teagues,
Aye.
Mayor Corman.
Aye.
I'll make a motion to approve municipal accounts payable for breakthrough beverage.
Second.
First and second, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Tao,
Aye.
Landite,
Aye.
Koopman,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Mayor Corman.
Aye. Mayor Council Communication. We have an HRA appointment of Luann Engel.
Yep. There was one vacant spot by Shorty, and Luann is looking to fill that.
That's nice.
I'll make a motion that we approve Luann Engel to be appointed to the HRA board.
Second.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call.
Teagues,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Koopman,
Yes.
Tao,
Aye.
Landite,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Corman.
Aye. So I was going to say something just so that it's out there for the public, that we are starting a Tracy Foundation, and we're looking for like 7 to 11 people to be on the board. So if anybody is interested in that, we don't have all the details yet. You can either get a hold of myself or the city, or Seth and is heading up part of that for the, and he'll talk about his part. But if you have any interest in being on that, we would greatly appreciate your applying for that. What should I say? What it is?
Sure. Or would you like,
I mean, do we
Seth
just,
could probably explain it.
yeah, we'll have Seth explain.
Yeah. Last week, the council and the community work group that's been looking for solutions with our community center, we decided, it was a consensus feeling that the best way to go was to work with the Southwest Initiative Foundation to establish a foundation, essentially a Tracy foundation. And the way this foundation would be set up would be that the Southwest Initiative Fund would be the ones that would actually be administering the foundation, and we would establish a sort of an endowment fund through the foundation. And this endowment fund would be for a wide range of projects that to benefit the Tracy community. To get started, we need to raise $25,000 from local contributions, which then would qualify us for a $25,000 match from the Southwest Initiative Fund, which would give us a $50,000 endowment, where the money would stay in this fund, and the principal would never be spent, but it would grow, and the income off of this, as it grew, could be used for special projects. Now, establishing the endowment fund would be the first step in establishing a separate project fund that would be used to raise money for the new community center. And my feeling is, and the feeling of I think everyone else there, is that we wanted to not waste time in raising the initial $25,000 so we can get this community endowment fund established, so then we can establish the project fund for the community center. And myself and Janine Vanden Tracy were tasked with the job of getting the ball rolling to get donations for this endowment fund, and there were two members, two people at that initial meeting last week that generously offered to kick off the fund. Actually, it was 3 individuals at that meeting, and since then, Janine and I have collected a total of $8,500 for this endowment fund, and so we feel like that's a very, very good start to getting that endowment fund established. So I encourage that anyone who is interested in that, we've just barely started collecting and soliciting and talking to people about this, but if anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to talk to anyone on the council or Janine and I. And just to amplify a little bit of what Mayor Corman said, we are hoping to get someone from the Southwest Initiative Fund back in Tracy to help us get to the next step of organizing. And it'd be my thought that I would really like to see our group expand, the base of our group expand to include additional people in the community. The more people who are interested in this, the easier it is going to be to raise money for the endowment fund and then for the project fund for the community center.
So we might want to add that it does not have to be just people that live in Tracy. We're thinking it's the surrounding Tracy area.
That's correct. The Tracy Area Foundation, and we eventually hope to tap into anyone who has an interest in Tracy. It might have been someone who graduated from Tracy High School 40 years ago, but still has an interest in seeing Tracy grow and prosper in the future. So I'm really excited about it, establishing both the Community Endowment Fund, which someday, I hope 10 years from now, we have a lot of money in it and we can do some really neat things for the community, and the fact that establishing that first endowment fund, it then is the first step to establishing that project fund to raise money for the community center.
Seth, when that endowment fund and the project fund is complete, is that when we pick up the board? Is that when the board comes in, or when does the board?
I think
it's sooner than that. As I understand it, and I did contact Jeff from the Southwest Initiative Foundation and told them we'd raised the initial $5,000, and my understanding is that once we had the initial $5,000, which we're well over now, that he would come back and help answer some of those questions. But my belief is that our next step would be to kind of get that advisory board going, those folks, and we want to try to get to 25,000, maybe even before that, and I wouldn't be surprised if we can. But I think that organizational meeting will happen pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I just want to stress that the board that's eventually set up for this Tracy Area Foundation, I mean, we're looking for people that are committed. that are willing to go out and make phone calls, willing to go out and meet people. It's not something that a board that just meets once every 5 weeks and has coffee and chats and talks about things. I mean, this has to be a working board to be successful.
And I think that's something that, what's his name, Jeff?
Jeff.
That Jeff would explain in more detail to interested people.
Yes.
You know, we're saying 7 to 11 people on the board, but hopefully we have more than 7 to 11 people that voice interest, and we bring them into this meeting so they know what they're getting themselves into, that they don't have to do a definite commitment to you, me, Seth, or anybody that, yes, I will be on the board. But if they even show interest in it, I think we need to get people to that meeting.
Yes. I'd agree with that.
That way they can hear what is expected and what they're.
Yep, and
then
say,
they can-
oh,
whether they wanna do
that's
that or
not
not.
what I had envisioned, and, you know, back out at that time.
And what was the figure that there are, am I remembering is correct, that there's about 30 communities in southwest Minnesota that have established these community endowments? Am I remembering that right?
That's right, yep. In southwest Minnesota.
Yeah. And many the same size as Tracy, some even smaller.
Walnut Grove is an example. They have
Okay.
one. Yes.
I think they said 18 counties, is that correct? 18 counties
It
in
was-
Minnesota?
I don't remember how many counties
thought it was
exactly, but it
18.
was 30 communities in southwest Minnesota. That I know.
You know, in talking with people, the one point that some people get a little confused at, they're saying, you know, well, if it's going to be a Tracy Endowment Fund, why am I being asked to write my check out to the Southwest Initiative Foundation? Well, it's just, they're the ones that are administrating it, and they're the ones that have the system down. They've got the paperwork. They can run this foundation or this endowment for a lot less money than we could if we tried to organize it ourselves. So we're just working through the initiative foundation, which is based in Hutchinson. So, but it's truly a Tracy area endowment, and it will be truly a Tracy Community Center project fund once we get that set up.
I think it's important people realize it is tax exempt. They will get a statement from the Southwest Initiative Foundation for their taxes, that will be generated right for them, so.
Did we give a donation to this Southwest Initiative?
We did this year. We gave $1,000. You, as a city council, gave $1,000 to Southwest Initiative Foundation earlier this year, yes.
And I think, I think I tried to talk the rest of the council down to $500, being as
Yeah.
frugal as I am, but I was probably an error of judgment.
You're eating crow now.
Yeah, I'll admit it.
Okay, I have a couple more things that I want to bring up. The next one is the Hmong Community New Year is November 20th, and it's 9 to 3. It's open to the public. They would love to have people from the public come there. It's at the Tracy High School. I'm going to have Koo tell you more about that one.
Put me on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's something that we've been doing for a while too. It's been, it's been taking place between Walnut Grove, Tracy, and Marshall. So, like the mayor said, we would love to have our community come out and join us that day. It's November 20th, so it's 2 weeks from now, I think.
At what time?
9 to 3, and it's a free event. There will be food there. Come out and you can get to see me in some Hmong clothes.
I don't know. If they have those Hmong egg rolls, they all ought to go.
Approximately how many people do you expect out at the high school? It's a pretty big crowd usually, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. We're expecting a lot, but I can't put a number on it. It's a big year for us because last year is supposed to be 30 years of Hmong, down here in Southwest, but with COVID, everything got shut down. So we're gonna do the 30-year celebration of the Hmong community down here. So we would love to have everyone come out and join us that day if you can.
So is 1992 when the first Hmong families moved to Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an important milestone in Tracy's history. Absolutely.
So they called and asked if I would be able to come say a few words, and I happened to be out of town that weekend for a family wedding. So they were hoping that somebody from the council would be able to go.
Well, cool will be there.
Yeah, that's
Exactly. My mind was like, you're not gonna.
They're hoping somebody else from the council will be able to go do that.
I
that
could
day.
do something.
Would you do that? Thank you.
Are you saying they don't listen to you? Cool.
No, you know her.
Mayor, I want to mention too that Jeff Carpenter is also going to be there with a table of information about the city and whatnot too. So and I'll probably stop by for some time as well. But I think it's great that the council is so supportive. We should be. And so thank you, Seth, for doing that. I appreciate it, and Koo as well.
Okay, my last thing that I have is, and I'm going to need your help on this one, parents. So there's a VETS program at the high school Thursday morning, but I don't remember what time it is.
11 o'clock.
11?
10:30?
Yeah, I think it was 10:30. That is open to the public, correct? So it'd be great if y'all could come out and support our vets, because we owe them a lot.
And we are honoring 3 vets this year.
So other than that, that's all I have. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, Mayor, we probably should announce at the same time that, of course, Veterans Day, this city hall is closed, and the senior activities at the Eagles Club is also closed today too. While we're on the Veterans Day subject.
Okay, so then we have staff reports. Do you want to?
Sure. I've got just a few quick updates on some things and a presentation, and then some information bringing back to you about the ambulance request for some money. And so just a few quick things. You have my report. It's already in your packet. But in terms of some of the items, the street project, there are, I think, 9 or 10 driveways at this point that are not in concrete. They were supposed to be according to milestone 1 in the contract, and at this point, by October 1st, the contractor sent us an email, which I forwarded to you a little bit earlier today, basically saying, well, we're trying, but we don't think it's going to happen. And I think it's likely that that's the case, that we're going to have some people that are going to have some gravel driveways over the course of the winter. The contractor will have to pay liquidated damages until that's complete. But I just want to make sure that the public is aware of it. We're not happy about it. That's obviously why we have a contract that says they have to complete it by a certain time, and there are consequences for that. But ultimately, that is the not so good news in terms of where we're at. Are there any questions about that, or is there anything else you would like the public to know about this?
So I know they were putting gravel
Yep.
in the driveways and all
Yep.
that. Have all the places where there's not sidewalk, have they all been nicely smoothed out, or are they still
I don't think so. Do you?
everywhere?
Shane, do you
'cause
know
come
that-
winter, that's going to be a hazard.
It is, and we'll work with the contractor to make that happen. So that it's not just.
They were just left.
No, you're 100% right about that. In fact, I called Kyle from ISG on Friday afternoon because I drove by, where the liquor store is out there, and you can see where some of the, work was done at 7th and Highway 14, and it's just basically, lumps of dirt everywhere. And so when we had a conversation with them the last time, we had our regular meeting. We have a regular construction update meeting with them before the last council meeting, and they assured us that they would put everything back so that we could still have winter operations. And so we'll work with them too about, smoothing out those areas in the very least where the sidewalks are. It's been frustrating, honestly.
Where the sidewalks go, if they're not gonna be done, do we need to put up some kind of a barricade or something so somebody don't try to navigate down them and get hurt?
That's probably a good idea too.
I don't know if that makes sense or not.
It is
I
probably a
think,
good
Jerry,
idea.
you were concerned about cleaning them with snow and stuff, weren't you?
Well, everything, I
Pretty-
mean.
Pretty
sorry,
hard to,
With a snow
blow snow
blower and
over
you
that.
blow a rock.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we won't have sidewalks in those areas, in the wintertime. And honestly, we have a lot of areas of the city that don't have sidewalks anyway. So it'll be important that those people don't try to, clean them, ultimately. But we will have to work on the communication piece, and we'll work with the contractor to make sure that they put everything the way that it should be if they can't concrete it in. That's ultimately the best we can do at this point. And it's unfortunate, but like I said, there are penalties in the contract for them not performing the way they're supposed to be. And, we'll have to see how it goes. We haven't totally given up yet, but we don't think it's very likely at this point, given the fact that we're getting close to mid-November.
Right now, anyone trying to walk down some of those sidewalks, I mean, they could easily,
Yep,
very small twist an ankle,
yep,
very easily break something.
yep.
And I just don't want those liabilities out there like
I hear
this.
you. I think the liability would be on the contractor, but ultimately, we don't want anybody hurt.
And that's probably why we should try to close them.
Yeah, just close them for the whole winter.
That's probably a good idea.
I just don't know how
So-
to do that.
Shane and I will have to have a conversation
How
about
do you
this
do
tomorrow
that?
ultimately, but we'll work with the contractor to do those things.
those liquidated damages, Eric,
Yes.
are they hard to collect?
I don't know the answer to that question. I had a brief conversation with Krista about this, about how we handle it. I mean, ultimately, we don't know what the amount is yet. My personal preference would probably be to just invoice them for it, so that we have a separate
Well.
way to collect it. But I don't know. Are they hard to collect? That's an answer I don't know the answer
If
to.
worst comes to worst, does it not just come off their final payment?
Well, here's the issue with their final payment. All that has to be approved by rural development. And so my guess is that we probably can use the USDA and rural development as kind of a hammer, because they know that, I mean, it's in the contract that everybody approved. So they may have a preference in terms of how they deal with it, but ultimately it will all be approved by them, whether it's off the contract or it's a separate payment. But my preference would be to invoice them separately, just so we can track it, so we know what it is. But at this point, we can't do anything until we know what the amount is, which we don't know because we don't know when this is going to end. Sometime in the spring, if it doesn't happen this fall.
Well, my thing is that just to make sure that you get it, even though you invoice it, before you give them the final payment.
I'm with you there. And at the end of the payment, you'll have to approve the final payment to the contractor, which will be next year sometime, actually probably in 2023. There's always a contingency that's held back. So we have a little bit of leverage, I guess, at the end anyway. The retainage, not contingency. Thank you. I used the wrong word. That's why I have Diane around in my ear so you can explain these things. And Shane obviously has something to say.
No, on the LD, I think we only ran into it once on another project. I believe it was on the final payment they took it.
Yeah.
Because there's a chance, say they don't get done next year, there's going to be more of it. I don't think that's going to happen because for what they got done this year compared, unless it rains all summer.
Yeah.
But so there's some weather delay stuff in the contract too. But I think generally it's at the end. But say rural development would likely have the final say on that, like Eric said. So.
Yeah. So we're working on it ultimately. We apologize. We sincerely apologize to the citizens. Unfortunately, that's the situation that we're in, we're doing the best we can.
So in the future, is it common when we give the contract to, whoever gets the bid, that they can subcontract out so much of the job, and then we're at the mercy not of one, but we're at the mercy of however many
Well, we should technically just be at the mercy of the one we gave the contract to. They're
Yeah.
the ones that
Yeah,
In charge of the other.
gotta,
Yeah, it's common to subcontract, at least portions of the job to other people. So it's not surprising that that's the case. They are blaming the subs, but
Yeah, they are.
I'm going to editorialize for a second. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's still their responsibility.
Ron had a question too earlier before the meeting, but on the hydro seeding, that's a temporary, it's a stabilization method they use for the stormwater permit through MPCA. It's something they have to, for erosion control. So it's not the final seeding, it's not, everything in this contract's sod. So they're gonna end up doing some more work in the spring, but that's just to keep their permit satisfied. So where it's hydro seeded, or it's kind of like got the green blanket shredded paper on it, that's not a permanent thing, but everything that's sodded is. So everybody's on the same page. I think that was on one of the updates Eric sent out maybe last week too, but if you missed it. So if you had any questions on that, or someone's asking about it, that's what that's about.
So that's all we have on that. Wish it were better news, but we're fortunate that our streets and curb and gutter in, so we won't have any issues with snow removal and driving, at least this winter. The only last thing I was going to mention is that the city council gave us direction to sell the liquor store, the old liquor store, not the new liquor store, and we're not prepared yet to have that conversation tonight. There's still some considerations we need to look at, not the least of which is what's the condition of that wall. And I think one of the considerations is, do you sell it as is? Do you try to do any repairs? Do you sell parts of there's pieces of the building inside that might have value that you might want to separate out and sell separately, as opposed to with the building? And so there's a little bit more investigation that we need to do on this. It's not quite as simple as just saying, hey, let's sell it. We're continuing to do some of that research, and ultimately we'll bring back some options for you so that you can decide how you want to do that. But we're not ready for that tonight. But I didn't want people to think that we'd forgotten about it, especially since we talked about it publicly a couple weeks ago. So we're on it. Is there any other questions about any of my report, the written report, or anything else that's going on in the city? I'd be happy to answer them. The last thing I have on my portion before I give it to Krista to talk about the ambulance request is a presentation that I put together kind of on plans related to beautification. This was a goal that you as the city council created earlier this year. And so we kind of took some time to put together some thoughts about what that means. And just want to give you an idea of the things that we're working on and get some feedback from you. And also felt it was important for the public to kind of see the things that we're working on as well. So your goal that you adopted was that we will strive to improve the attractiveness and beauty of the city by enhancing park maintenance, exploring code enforcement initiatives, and developing a program to improve the appearance of downtown and the Highway 14 corridor. So beauty is kind of first and foremost in this goal. And so I was curious, what a definition of beauty is. And I found this one and I kind of liked it. And it's the quality attributed to whatever pleases or satisfies the senses or mind, as by line, color, form, texture, proportion, rhythmic motion, tone, etc., or by behavior, attitude, etc. Basically, it means a lot of different things to other people, but the idea is that it makes you feel good, right? When you see something, and every person has something that they enjoy that makes them feel good. And so ultimately that's what this is about. So why are we doing this? It's kind of interesting. We did a survey with the comprehensive plan, and we asked, what areas might have the most concern of yours. And what we found was that the two areas that have the most concern, the largest negative impacts on the city of Tracy, when we asked the citizens, were 1, properties and buildings that are in disrepair, and 2, conditions of the roadways.
And we've spent a considerable amount of time, this summer trying to improve the roadways. But ultimately, how things look, properties, buildings, and things like that, this is something that people are really concerned about in the city. And I think it's not too much of a stretch to say that rundown buildings and pothole roads are not beautiful. And so, that's a lot of, what this is ultimately about. Beautification addresses the community's top concerns. I mentioned this before. We went over to Pipestone and talked to them about their code enforcement program. And what they believe is they've documented about $1.9 million in improved assessed valuation. In other words, the property values improved that much because of the work that they were doing over there. And so it's, this is about property values, not just for the buildings that are improved, but also everyone else. Because your property value is going to be determined by other people's property values and what they sell for, which also helps enhance the tax base. This is an economic development issue, beautification, beauty makes people feel good. People want to be in places that make them feel good, whether they want to do business here or own a home here or visit as a tourist. I mean, these are all economic development issues at the end of the day. And so when you talk about your goal to grow the community, this is a big part of it. So started asking ourselves the question, what does the strategy for beautification look like? And I pulled this off of the internet, and I kind of like it. It says if you want different results, you got to take different actions. And if we want to improve the way the city looks, we need to do something different. I think that's why you wanted to make it a goal in the first place, right? Because if it weren't a citizen concern and you weren't concerned about it, I don't think doing the same old thing is gonna make that happen. So, a couple of thoughts, that we had on that is, one, we ought to be setting an example as a city. Maintaining our parks as an example. Shane gave a presentation on that a little bit earlier this year. City Hall as a building itself. We have a lot of issues with tuck pointing on the outside. We have boarded up windows on City Hall. If we were able to address those, the building would look a lot better. And it's difficult for us to go out and ask people to improve their properties if we can't take care of the stuff that we have. The second lesson that we think is important is that this is about cultivating partnerships with other agencies, with the community, and grants, ultimately. We don't have enough money to do this all by ourselves, and so we've got to go out and find ways to find money, to be able to do these kinds of things. And we need to engage the community in that. The Community Foundation's discussion that Seth was talking about earlier has got to be part of this, too. Ultimately, the community has to be a part of this. So there were several things that the goal talked about. First one was parks. So the park committee has been meeting, and they're all about kind of creating this community vision for how do you do parks. The Central Park Master Plan, which you approved money for last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, is really central to what they're doing. What does that look like? What do we want Central Park to be? Historic preservation of Central Park. We already did a report that showed that the bandshell and maybe the whole park might qualify for historic preservation. That's a pot of money with grants that we can go after eventually. Restoration of the bandshell, restoration of the park. And there's some opportunities for that. Shane did a plan for maintenance for parks over the summer. And I will tell you that we talked about it, in our regular meetings, and I know that we've already knocked off more than half of the list that's on there, and the things that we've done, painting benches, fixing ball fields, things like that. The Department of Natural Resources grant that we're going to be going after again next year, which will be in your budget, will be something again that will be an enhancement to that. There's something new that we've started to work on with the school. Shane and myself and Val at the library, who's going to be writing this grant, met with the superintendent and Mike Munson, the principal, about a Safe Routes to School grant request. Now, this isn't going to cost us any money. Basically, this is kind of an in-kind grant. So we would write a grant from MnDOT, Department of Transportation, that SRDC would do for us. And they would come in and help us write a Safe Routes to School plan for the city. Now, why do we care about this, and what is it? Well, Safe Routes to Schools basically is a plan that allows kids to safely walk to school or bike to school. We have all kinds of issues, as you know, because of the railroad tracks and people getting to and from. They're not supposed to walk to school, but, you know, anecdotally, you see people doing that in town, and that's just kind of what happens. And so how do we identify a plan for trails, a plan for, you know, ways to get to and from schools? Now, why is this important ultimately? If we have a plan on record, a Safe Routes to Schools plan on record that shows where trails might be, for example, we can apply for future transportation alternatives grants from the state of Minnesota to build those trails. And that might be bike trails that we don't have that citizens can use regardless of school kids. It could be enhancing the maintenance that people are concerned about at the trail system out at the park, at Swift Lake Park. And so this is kind of part of the process. If you want future construction grants for trails, for bikes, and for walking and things like that in the city, which I think we do, and for maintenance of the ones we have to start to have a plan in place that allows us to do that. And so this is kind of the first step in doing that, and we're working with the school, and we'll write a grant. It's not due until January to make that happen, and that will not cost us any money, either us or the school district. So that's what that's about. You already know about the park shelter partnership that we're doing at the school. Again, really good partnership. Kids do the labor. We provide the materials. It's a great deal for everybody all the way around. We're looking at potential partnerships with MnDOT and the county for trails. SRDC is putting together a regional plan for trails right now. Rosemary Bruce White, who's doing our comprehensive plan, who lives here in the city of Tracy, is working on that regional plan right now. And we really like the idea of being able to connect the city of Tracy to other regional areas, like the regional park over in Walnut Grove, or some of the other trails that go down to Slayton, or to Lake Chautauqua. We think that's really important. We had a meeting earlier this year with MnDOT, and we did a flyover with a drone of Highway 14 between 4th Street over here and over to Morgan. And because MnDOT is going to be reconstructing Highway 14 in that location in about 5 years. So starting that planning process, what that looks like. And we pointed out to them, the pedestrian areas that we need, areas for bike trails and things like that, so we can connect what we already have at Swift Lake Park to some of the other bike trails that we have along Front Street. And so when we partner, because they're ultimately going to be paying for this, but we need to tell them what we need, and that can help us connect some of those things as well. So this is part of the partnerships program portion of this, why I was talking about how important this is. We can't afford to do this all by ourselves, but people are coming in and spending money in our city. There and on Center Street, for example, which we should also include a bike path on to connect with as well. This is all really important. So thinking about that planning and making those connections, this is money we don't have to spend, or money that's going to be spent anyway. And so that's a lot of what kind of we've been working on and kind of our vision for. And I already mentioned the SRD regional plan to connect, to regional trails. Are there any questions about that parks, and trails portion of it, in terms of what we're working on?
Where you mentioned trails, a bike trail along Highway 14, would that
Yep.
be off the highway, or would it be a painted lane on the roadway?
That's a good question, and I don't think we know the answer to that question yet.
I think that most people would say they'd prefer something that if it were separated from the highway. But ultimately, since it's a state highway, it'll be their call. But we could certainly advocate a certain way. We're reconstructing Center Street, next year, as you know, as part of our new phase for our street project. That will include some additional sidewalks that are not there, because you can't walk between Highway 14 and the railroad tracks on a full sidewalk. It's a patchwork. And there's no bike path there at all right now, even though there's a bike path north of Highway 14 all the way to Swift Lake Park. And so Kyle is now going to start doing, from ISG, is going to start doing the surveying. And ultimately, when they engineer it, we want to have a full sidewalk so that people can walk it, and a bike path so that that'll connect where we have the bike path at Southwood Street all the way to Highway 14, and that'll connect things. So if you think about the city as kind of ultimately we'd like to have a circle that goes all the way around the city so that you can take your bike all over town if you want to. I know you bike a lot, Seth, and I think that's the kind of thing that people would like. And ultimately, while we're planning for these roads, this is the time to do it. So that's kind of the vision, but we don't have that design yet, but Kyle's working on that right now. Code enforcement, model on kind of what Pipestone is doing. I've talked about this a little bit already, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, but our 2022 strategy will be more compliance focused as opposed to punishment focused. I mean, in the past, we basically just sent them a letter, and if they didn't comply, we cited them criminally. Well, we need to be working with people to try to get them to bring it into compliance. Because at the end of the day, they just go to court and they get a fine and that's it, and they just keep paying the fines. That doesn't help us, doesn't help the city look better. So we need to work with people a bit more on compliance as opposed to just punishing. Code enforcement, this is really a big thing. That's, Pipestone, what they told us was that their biggest code enforcement time is actually during the winter. They can see things a little bit better that way. We kind of do code enforcement just one time a year. And code enforcement should be a year-round process all the time if you really want an effective program. And so it's a little bit different kind of way of looking at it, but that's what it ought to be. The new software that's going to help us manage and track that is the software is installed. We've got another meeting next week. Krista's kind of heading up that effort to put all this together to design, what does it look like? The software is going to allow us to spit out letters, for example, violation letters, track it, things like that. So we're working through what that's going to look like. We're probably going to have to bring back some code changes to the City Council. We've been looking pretty heavily at the code at the moment. We're finding some things that are lacking in it, as well as some other things we probably need to clean up. Because if there's something we can't enforce, we don't want to include it. But that's something we're looking at doing next year as well, as kind of almost a rewrite of a lot of the city code, ultimately, anyway. Any questions about code enforcement? All right. So downtown on Highway 14. This is about the appearance of those kind of areas. Some of this is historic preservation, which allows us to tap into some of these other monies. It's about streetscape improvements. And what I mean by street, and we'll talk about that, what that means in a second. The comprehensive plan that we're working on right now is going to outline some of the tools of what that's going to look like. And I'm going to talk about something new, which is a community artist in residence program that we might be able to tap into next year as well. So, the first one is historic preservation. There's a picture on the left of this, and this is a picture that was actually done on something, and some of you might remember, Ron might remember. 20 years ago, we did something called the Sabangi Plan. And there's a bunch of stuff that I've got on my desk that I've read through. It's actually really, really interesting because it goes through and talks about all of, what things could look like in downtown. And there's some pictures that I put in here as an example of that. So this picture on the left is an illustration that these architects did of what City Hall might look like if we actually restored it. And so when I talked about how do we, take care of our own first, this is a rendering of what City Hall might look like if we, put windows back and, changed it so that it didn't look like it was, a garage door, and did some of that restoration work. Ultimately, we completed that phase 1 survey, as you already know, and we're applying right now for a phase 2 survey of City Hall to try to get City Hall on the National Historic Register so we can tap into some of that money to do some of this work. A lot of it is going to be exterior, just let's get the building saved, because a lot of the brick is really starting to fall apart, and we've got HVAC issues, windows, things like that. But ultimately, it will lead to bigger and better things. A case study that I looked at, I sent an email to you earlier this year talking about this, but this is a good example of the kind of thing that we could do with City Hall. So there's a community way up north, Big Fork, Minnesota. They had a City Hall that was built in 1936 by the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, which was an agency in the 30s to build things during the Great Depression. Our building was built by the WPA in 1938. So same kind of scenario. Their building was deteriorating. They didn't know what to do with it. People talk about, should we tear it down and build a new one? What are we going to do? They were using it for all kinds of things, community meetings, and the American Legion met there. Of course, City Hall and all their activities were there. Ultimately, they went through a process to list the building on the National Historic Register. It took them 8 years. I think we can do it quicker than this, but it did take them 8 years. They secured grants from the Minnesota Historical Society and others and raised money for $900,000, and they completely restored their City Hall. And you can see some pictures here on the screen of what it looks like on the outside today, as well as what their inside, some of their inside looks like, which they use for their city council meetings and community meetings and things like that. Big Fork, Minnesota is less than 1,000 people. They are much smaller than us. And if Big Fork, Minnesota can do something like this, I don't see any reason why the city of Tracy can't. As I said, the space includes city offices, meeting space for the community, and a whole variety of other things. So that's the kind of thing that we could do, if we can get this building listed. Could be kind of exciting. So that picture there on the right is of the old lights that were on the outside of the building. So right now we have these little tiny garage white carriage lights outside the building. And I was talking to Val about it, and she said, this was like a year ago, and she says, oh my God, there used to be these great lights out there. Do we still have them? And I said, I don't know. Let's see what we can find out. So I talked to Lydell, our facilities person, and I said, do we have those lights? Oh yeah, they're sitting down in the basement. So we found them. And we went over to DeSpit and said, can you help us restore these? Put these back together? And you can see the picture of them, sitting there, and yeah, they've been restored. And so, and they put new glass in them, and we'll retrofit them with LED lights, and ultimately we're going to put them back up again. Because I think that looks a heck of a lot better than the other lights that we have. But to me, the lights are kind of a symbol of the kinds of things that we could do. It didn't cost that much money. There's these big brass behemoth things, they're really heavy. And so we plan to do that. So these are just kinds of small projects that we can start right now, like replacing those lights. I've got Lydell over on the second floor of the VMC. He's already worked on the hallway over there if you want to go over and take a look. And fixed all the cracked plaster that was coming down, and redid all that and started painting it. And I know there are community groups that use that. Koo's wife used it for a meeting last week, as a matter of fact. And this is just elbow grease. Paint doesn't cost that much. You know, going in and pulling up that old carpet and removing the glue that's underneath it, that just takes elbow grease and a little bit of solvent. And so we can do some things that, you know, there's no reason for us to just leave it in disrepair when these kinds of things don't cost very much money and all they do is take time. And so those are the things that we're already working on. One of the things that we're working on right now, you know, we have $40,000 that the county is committed to put a lift over there on the other side, which if you're going to use that side for any kind of use for large groups, you're really going to want to have some kind of handicap access. So we have that $40,000. There's a bunch of money from the Arpa program, which is one of the COVID programs that they're trying to give away for grants for capital construction. And so right now we're working on a potential grant to use that $40,000 for a $200,000 project to try to restore, that's not the right word, to improve that second floor of that building for some offices for Jeff in the chamber, ultimately, hopefully, and you know, some co-working space that would allow people who work at home, maybe remote workers, to go in and do a Zoom meeting or have access to Wi-Fi or have a meeting or something like that. One of the things that the EDA has talked about and we've talked about as a community is, you know, COVID is changing the way that everybody works. And if you can work at home remotely, why would you buy a $300,000 house in the Twin Cities if you can buy a $100,000 house in Tracy and live a lot better quality of life in a safe community with good schools? But if we're going to attract people like that, we've got to have amenities that people might want to use, you know? My brother has always worked at home. He lives in Colorado, and they pay way too much for their house. But ultimately, you know, he has meetings, and he has to do these kinds of things. And so having a place for him to go and do those kinds of things, you know, rather than just kind of sitting on your couch or your dining room table, I mean, that's an amenity for people, and we can use that to attract people. So if we could pull off something like this, again, it would cost us nothing. And we could potentially use that room upstairs for other things as well. And so it's an idea that we're working on, and now that we know we're not going to be putting a community center on the second floor over there, it's the kind of thing that we can do. Not saying that this is going to happen, but it's an idea we have and that we're kind of working towards. But I don't see any reason, you know, to utilize the resources that we have, you know, to make the facility that we have now better. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. And I already talked about applying for historic preservation grants for City Hall. I put together these presentations and I just start talking and I get ahead of myself on these things. Downtown streetscapes. This is also a picture from the Sabangi Plan. That is where B&K Tan is today. And so what they did is they took downtown and they did a bunch of drawings and renderings of what would downtown look like if we really spruced it up. And this is an example of that they did on that corner. And you can see the bump outs out there that I know some people have some concerns about. And they specifically called out bump outs as an idea, as a way to spruce up downtown. And you can kind of see in the front of this picture some of those lights. The lights actually, I believe, as I understand it, were kind of the one thing that was done from the Sabangi Plan, but ultimately we have these nice lights downtown. And so I kind of think of this, you know, Sabangi Plan as a bit of a guide for how do we do things moving forward downtown, some of which we've already started. So here's some pictures from some other communities, you know, in the surrounding area. So New Ulm. I was in New Ulm last weekend, and I've been there, I'm sure many of you have. If you walk downtown, you know, you see benches, you see trees, you see places to sit outside for people to congregate. And you're seeing some of that stuff now in our downtown. If you look outside of, you know, Bonnie and Clyde's now, they had tables out there, and the Plaid Moose had, you know, had chairs out there, and, you know, it makes a big difference. Jeff and Val and I went to Granite Falls, and I'm going to talk about that trip in a second because it was really cool. But same thing. You can see Granite Falls has benches downtown. They have this crosswalk art program that they did that kind of spruced things up. Gaylord, Minnesota, I drove through there this summer and I took these pictures. Banners, flowers, benches, all of that kind of stuff. It makes things more inviting, more friendly for people to walk at. This is beautification. Bump outs and wider sidewalks in place already. Benches, planters, flowers, trees. We're working with Above the Fold right now on some banner designs. I don't have any yet for light poles. We can do a similar kind of thing. I hope we can do some of that stuff on Highway 14 too, but we're limited because Excel is telling us we can't do that stuff anymore. But it's the kind of thing, some signage on 14 would be good too. The downtown historic district that we've been working on, that we'll begin to work on, we'll open up some funds for tax credits and grants. We can also apply for CDBG funds, Community Development Block Grant funds. It's the same source of money that we use for the small cities grants for the home improvements that people have been using in town. And we have an existing fund for that. One question that I want to throw out there, but I think it's something we really need to start talking about. That picture in the lower right is a picture of a downtown plaza. I don't even know where that is exactly, but one of the things that I really want to start talking about is what do we do with the old Masonic building lot? Because that dirt patch, that corner is really, really important. We have our public library on there. We have a cafe on one corner. We have the B&K Tan that's occupied on the other corner. And we have this big empty eyesore lot. What is it? Is it a parking lot? Is it a community center? Is it a plaza like you see here with benches and, plants and places to sit and things like that? Is it all of that? I don't have an answer to that question, but in my personal view, it's important, for us to, I'm just kind of planting the seed for in the future to have this discussion down the road, but I think that's an important corner in terms of being able to attract people downtown. The comprehensive plan calls out some of these things that we're working on. Identifying opportunities for economic development and land use, that way Highway 14 and downtown. That'll do that for us. We have some community focus groups that will begin meeting. We've had one so far, which is the one on parks and open space. Jeff and I have been talking about the economic development and some of the business corridors. We'll probably call in the EDA as well as maybe this new retail committee that's been meeting to talk about those kinds of things. But ultimately, this plan that we're going to have done sometime next year will help us identify what some of those opportunities look like. And we'll probably bring back some zoning changes to the City Council for consideration. One of the things that I've talked to the Planning Committee about and also City Council briefly is we have a special downtown business district, and it's really restrictive right now. And it's kind of old-fashioned. It contemplates kind of an old downtown, where you have a JCPenney's and a drugstore and all this stuff, but we don't have those things anymore. And we're probably not going to get them. We're not getting a JCPenney's back. And so we need to think about, well, what does downtown look like in 10 or 20 years? Because otherwise we're going to lose it like we lost the Masonic building. And so thinking about the uses and how we want it to look is going to be really important. And so we'll probably bring back some zoning changes so that we don't have these restrictive ideas about what downtown is supposed to look like anymore. Because it's just old-fashioned. It's not what we're going to be in 10 or 20 years. This is the last thing that I want to talk about, and I'm going to have Jeff come up too and chat about a little bit about this too. But Granite Falls, community of 2,600 people, so they're not that much. They're the same size as us. They did an amazing thing, and they had a little bit of luck in this. But they created this Granite Falls City Artist in Residence program. And you're like, what the heck is that? Well, we didn't know what it was either. But we went up there and talked to them about it. What it is a small town program. It embeds an artist in City Hall to collaborate with city departments on projects and engage residents in planning, and kind of encourages participation in what's going on, informing the public about the city, and just kind of, energizes people. So what we did this summer with the Movies in the Park program, well, that's kind of a similar kind of deal, where we show a movie and we engage the community in that. They partnered with a nonprofit. Again, there's that partnership word again, right? Called the Department of Public Transportation. There's a lady by the name of Ashley Hansen, and she's pretty amazing, who heads this nonprofit. She knows Tracy, knows people here, and so we have some kind of fortunate things. They've only been doing this for a couple of years, but they did 3 things in the last year that were really impactful. One is they created this bench art program downtown, so they have all these benches now, and they had artists come in and do art and paint them. They have a crosswork rock art program, and you saw some of those pictures about that earlier, but they have 20 intersections around the city where they did a call for projects, and these artists came in and basically painted all the crosswalks, which is an interesting thing to look at. So you might want to go down there and just say, wow, I want to see what that looks like, or I'll walk to that place. It's a way to lure people downtown or lure people to parts of your city. And they did this festival called Squid Fest, which is utterly made up, but it was basically a regional art and music festival, which is just an opportunity for people to come to town and eat food and be merry, which is just, essentially the eat, drink, and be merry, which is essentially the same thing that Boxcar Days is. But, there's no reason why we couldn't do more than one of these, right? And we'd had some kind of internal discussions about, gosh, what if we did a downtown mural or something, like they're doing in Marshall? Wouldn't that be cool? It's an opportunity for people to come to your town to see things. They have one in Walnut Grove, for example. There's a big mural on the side of one of the buildings downtown. It's an opportunity for people to come downtown and see things, or wherever else you want to take them, whether it be Central Park or somewhere along Highway 14. It doesn't matter. It's pretty cool. So what they did through this nonprofit, and they raised it all money. All this money came through grants. And the Granite Falls Community Foundation, incidentally, funded these programs. They got a big grant from the National Endowment of the Arts, and they hired this lady by the name of Danny, who was originally from New York City, and they went to Taos, New Mexico. And I don't know if any of you have ever been to Taos, New Mexico, but it's a huge artistic community for Southwest art in New Mexico. And she came in and she worked with people and asked the question, well, what is art mean to you? What is culture? What does that mean to you in Granite Falls? And, it meant this kind of stuff. It probably means something different here in the city of Tracy than it does some other places, but ultimately we want to try to replicate some of this. The second thing that we saw, which was really cool, is they have a downtown building. They got it donated from somebody who owned it. They call it the Yes House. And it kind of houses this community artist in residence program. Danny actually lives there on the second floor. So it literally is artist in residence. And so they went out and said, okay, well, we've got this building. What do you want us to do with it? What do you want in it? And we went in and we did a tour of it. And we couldn't believe it because we thought, how the heck did you do all this? But literally, it includes co-working space. They've got a small business incubator in there. They've got a small 50-seat performance venue for plays and things like that. There's an art gallery, a media lab, a place for youth. It includes an artist workshop, a recording studio, a yoga and dance studio, a rock climbing facility. Actually, the rock climbing facility is there. Some of this isn't built yet. And it includes like a place out front for coffee and conversation. So It's roughly the size of what the old multipurpose center is. But I'm not saying you replicate that here, but what I'm saying is, wow, I had no idea that you could put all that stuff for the entire community in one place. Thinking about our community center moving forward, how do we put all the stuff that the people in the community want all in one place? It's really eclectic, but really interesting. So what do we learn from them? One, it takes partnerships. You got to have involvement from outside people and outside funding partners, private and public, as well as local organizations. Two, this is organic. This is not something where the city council says, okay, go build this. This has got to be community-led, grassroots. You got to be meeting the needs of people. You got to listen to people. You got to talk to them about what they want in the community. And that's what this process is about. And it could be anything here, Again, this is about beauty, right? I mean, beauty could mean lots of things to different people. It might be a nice piece of music, or it might be something you see, or it might just be a comfortable conversation. Swift Lake Park is beautiful. It doesn't have to be, just a piece of art. So what's going to happen next? So this costs us nothing. Again. So we went up there and we talked to them. We said, wow, this is kind of cool. How do we do this? So it turns out the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council has a grant to work with 3 communities in Southwest Minnesota to create their own program like this. It's kind of like a needs assessment. So they come in for 6 months and they say, okay, they work with people and say, what would this look like for you? What can you do? What can't you do? And Tracy's one of the 3 communities that they would like to work with in Southwest Minnesota. And so what would happen beginning next year is that they would engage the community in a bunch of workshops, talk to people. What does this look like? And ultimately try to prepare a plan for if this is something we want to do. We get to the end of this, it doesn't mean we have to do it, or even anything that they tell us to do, or what we should do. But it can get people excited. I'll give you an example. We met with, last week, Jeff set up a meeting, actually. I don't know if you set up the meeting or somebody else set up the meeting. And I'll let you come up and talk about that too. And we had the lady that runs the Pipestone Theater come over and talk to us about their Performing Arts Center and what they do. And talked to some other people, said, wow, that would be really cool. Wouldn't it be great if we could do some theater here, of some kind? And, maybe that's our thing. I don't know what it is, but what's great about this stuff is that it meets your goals of beautification. It brings people to town, which is what we need to do, because there aren't enough people. We're 2/3 of the size that we were 40 years ago. And we lost 5% of our population in the last decade. How do you get more people to town? How do you get people to want to live here and stay here? This is the kind of stuff that you can do. So Jeff, do you want to come up and talk a little bit about what you saw as well in this whole thing? Because we were kind of amazed.
A couple of things that Eric went over was just to add on to those a little bit is not only did this group come in and talk to the Eagles, they went to the American Legion meetings, they went to the chamber meetings, but they also collaborated with the school district, because the school district did some of the painting downtown through their art programs and through some of the paintings that they did in the crosswalks. And if you go uptown, and like Eric said, and I think you all know too, that Tracy and Granite Falls are about the same size. And if you go up there, they're uptown. Our uptown or downtown, however you want to call it, it's coming to life, but theirs is alive. I mean, it is just flat alive all the way through. All the buildings are full. Couple more things that this program that we could possibly be accepted, or we are accepted into, is they actually are going to save a building. We've got a couple buildings that need to be saved downtown, through grants and through some of their funds that they go through as a group. So we're kind of lucky that we're going to be able to be in. Another thing I want to bring in is, because we have a great sports program. We always had that here in Tracy, but this will bring a different group of people to town also. You know, when Eric talks about bringing different people through different events, or whether it's the movies in the park, or what we're going to have here in December 18th or 17th is movies in the VMC on a night for the kids. This will bring a group of people in that aren't used to coming to town. And I'm going to kind of, I don't know how to exactly say this, but I've talked to Diane about this before. We go over to the coffee shop, and there's people over there that are different between you and me. And they're over there at this coffee shop. This coffee shop has brought people into town that I don't know, that I don't recognize. This is the same thing here. We need to be able to bring people to town. What happened in the 90s? We brought people to town, a different group of people that have blended in and fit in with us very well. That's what we want to continue to do as a community. And just bring, but you got to have the things that people want. We're not going to be in Minneapolis. We're not going to have the U.S. Bank Stadium. We don't want the Vikings here anyway. You know, but we want to have things that are here that are going to bring the people in to keep thriving as a community. And this is just another step. And I was impressed with what we had up there. Ashley was in town before. You know Ashley. Your wife knows Ashley very well. She's a great organizer. And if we could set something up like this where somebody comes in and talks to the Eagles and talks to our chamber and sits down with the American Legion and gets everybody moving in the same direction. That's the collaboration that we need. Just to save a couple buildings and then work on the community center, everything else we're going to be doing. So I guess that's what I took out of it. But he mentioned something. Art's different to different people, and they really hammered that point across to us, where art can be actual art, where it's a painting, or it could be some kind of embroidering, or there could be some kind of music is art. And this is a place, the building that they have up there, it's not completed. In fact, a lot of it's just studded out. It's not ready to go yet, but they're working on it. It's a work in process. But it brings different people into that group. Maybe the group that's not going to be over here shooting baskets. Maybe it's a kids group that's going to come in and wants to put on a children's theater, something to that effect. So that's kind of what I got out of it.
One more thing I'm going to add, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions about this, but is that I kind of started thinking about this because there was something called the Southwest Minnesota Arts Crawl. It's something it was an event that was put on by the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, and you're like, what the heck is that? Well, what it is essentially kind of this self-guided tour on a day in September where you could drive around all over Southwest Minnesota and look at various things or experience different things. So they stopped in Curry, and they stopped in Lamberton, and they stopped in Walnut Grove, and they stopped in Redwood Falls, and they stopped in Windham, and they stopped in Slayton. Did they stop in Tracy? No. We weren't even on the list, but all these people, I don't know however many people, were driving all over, but they had no stop in Tracy. And I thought, well, why didn't they have a stop in Tracy? There's probably things that we could, that they could see here. Well, part of it is engaging, with these folks. And the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council puts on stuff like that. That's an economic development issue, right? That's a tourist issue. And so, these are some of the things that kind of the opportunities, and we think about partnerships, tapping into grants that we've never tried to tap into before. It can be kind of exciting. So we got an email earlier this week after we visited with them, from Nicole, who's the executive director of the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, saying that Ashley's going to be in touch with us next month to kind of get this launched. And as I said, this doesn't cost us anything. It's actually a grant that they're getting, and we're just going to be a partner in exploring where this goes. At this point, it's just blue sky, but we think it's kind of interesting. Certainly, what Granite Falls has done has been pretty interesting. So, with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions about that or anything else in the presentation.
We've also done our homework with bringing in a lady that set up as the main fundraiser and works at the Pipestone, where I'm sure some of you have heard of the Calumet Players are in, and they have their own, I'm going to call it a theater. It's a 250-seat theater they'll have their plays there. They will have their readings there. They work with the school on things that go on there. It's just it's a place for everybody to go. Not any particular person, but any type of groups that to go in there. So we're working with her, and she agreed to give us all the information that she has, and so we met with her last week. So it's something that we're taking a little bit at a time, a step at a time, and trying to put some things together so we can answer some questions.
Questions on that?
I also believe that we have a lot of people here in Tracy that have hidden talents that we don't know about. And I don't
Remember
think.
Seth being in it.
I seem to remember you playing in the community band once upon a time, too.
Oh, yeah, but we don't talk about me.
Well, we need to bring those hidden talents out.
You know, I look at Granite Falls, and it is nice downtown, but how many of you people have driven up Highway 23 and took a right or took a left, and not even knowing what was downtown Granite Falls? It happens a lot, don't it? So, what you're saying is very true. But we got something they don't have. We got a billboard called Highway 14.
Sure.
And that's what we need to dress up, and that's what will bring the people downtown.
I agree with you, council member. We've got to include
You
Highway
go
15.
into Granite Falls in 23, and you have no clue what's downtown.
Absolutely.
No clue.
I think that part of the question we need to ask is, how do you make those connections between, 14 and downtown?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a couple of ideas that we've kind of brainstormed about internally, that may or may not be good ideas. One of them is related to this safe routes to school thing. I mean, if we had a walking path between the Wheels Across the Prairie Museum, and we've got the garden, and then you can come all the way downtown. Well, I mean, is there a walking history tour there, somewhere where it's part of their program? Someone goes to the Wheels Across the Prairie Museum, and you've been to all these places where they have visitor centers and whatnot, and they give you a little pamphlet, and you go walk down this path and look at the different things. I thought about this because, Mark Seeger's old building where Bonnie's Boutique is, now, there's a little plaque out front, and it describes kind of what that building used to be. People, they're interested in stuff like that. There's actually a plaque like that right next to the Yes House in Granite Falls. Well, if we had a historic district downtown and we had things like that marked what maybe used to be, or this is where Laura Ingalls Wilder got on the train for the first time, or whatever, that kind of stuff. You can have some, connections to what we already have in town. We've got some pretty amazing, amenities. And you're right. You're right, Ron. I mean, when you're talking about 14, we need to tell people where things are at and how they get there. And that has to be a part of it. I promise you, it's not all just about downtown. But certainly, beautification is important. It's a strategy for preserving, what we have, and a vision for where we might be in 10 or 20 years.
A good example is the Dobsons. I like what they've done.
Absolutely.
In a short period of time. It looks neat when you drive by there.
And you know what?
That's what we got to keep doing.
Absolutely. And I will tell you that what they're doing with the crafts and upcycling furniture and things like that, that is the CARE program, in reality. I mean, we started looking at stuff like that. If you could attract more things like that, that becomes a magnet for tourists. It becomes a magnet. It's huge. It's huge. So that's a perfect example of the kind of. We've got a couple things that are really we have going right now, and that happens to be one of them in town. And we need to get more of that.
No, I'm 100% of behind the ideas that you've presented. A lot of fantastic ideas. These are things that Tracy needs to do to move forward and grow. And Ron, as you said, in Granite Falls, no one knows what their downtown is, but if you have an art crawl or some specific event, it gets them there. And that's what Tracy needs to be doing. Just a lot of really good ideas. and I'm very supportive of it.
So
But
that,
it takes a lot of different groups and
does.
connections, and I'm glad that you've
It
had
does.
connections with the Southwest
working
Minnesota
on it.
Arts and Humanities Council, and all of those links are important.
any other questions or comment about this?
Good job.
Well, it's blue sky first, but thank you. When we have some stuff, we'll see.
How many years did it take us to fix that sign that said downtown Tracy? I went by that how many times before that got fixed? We didn't even know where downtown Tracy was at.
Well, I
And
think
now we
some
got a
sign-
sign there, but it's a sign.
We need to work on some signage, I agree with you. You betcha.
And as far as the posts go, why do we have to rely on XL Energy? Can't we put our own posts up?
I think we can. There's some costs associated with that. I'm trying to do this stuff on, recognizing we have kind of a limited, budget, I guess you could say. So we'll do the best we can. I think there's some things we can do on downtown, or excuse me, on Highway 14. Okay, that's all we have on that.
I just wanted to add, Eric, I think you threw out a lot of visionary ideas, but we also there's a lot of very practical suggestions that we can do that wouldn't have to cost a huge amount of money. Like maybe we can't develop the Masonic Plaza or build a new building on it next year, but we certainly can do some things like get some park benches and planters and things downtown to make our downtown more attractive.
We certainly can, and Val and I were talking about that very thing, actually, just in the very least of getting some benches and putting them outside of the library at a minimum.
Right.
These things are really inexpensive. You can get a bench for, $500-600 or something like that. And that's certainly well within our budget. And that's kind of to the point about some of the work that I'm having Lydell doing on the second floor of the VMC and restoring these lights. I mean, these are little things, but yeah, it's not the big home run, but you can win a lot of games by hitting singles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Jeff touched on this. We have a lot of talent in this town. We need to tap into that.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of talent here, but
Yep.
we just got to tap into it. And the other thing I'd like to see is the VMC, a gymnasium. We need a sound system in there so we can use that building.
That's a really good
Just gotta
idea.
dribble basketballs all day long in there.
I think we could use it for a lot more than what we're using it for.
Unbelievable.
So, thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it. The next item, the mayor, is just some information from Krista about the ambulance contract. As you remember, the Tracy Ambulance had asked us for $30,000 a year for the next 5 years, and you wanted some information from them. And Krista has that information, and I'll turn it over to her.
Yeah, perfect. So a little background. We are ending a 5-year contract with the ambulance at the end of 2021. In 2017, we signed that contract, doing a lump sum payment of $140,000. At that time, the ambulance had come to us requesting some funds for a new ambulance rig. And we had the $200,000 from the sale of the hospital that could be used for health-related initiatives within the city. So at that time, we chose to donate the $140,000 to the ambulance to cover a 5-year period. Prior to that, from 2013 to 2015, we gave the ambulance about $14,000 each year, and then in 2016, we gave them $14,000. So with the request from the council to the ambulance, they did send us a breakdown of how they calculated their $30,000 request. It was in your packets. Kind of a little hard to understand. Basically what they're doing is they take a look at all of the service areas that they cover, and they look at population average market value, and then also the average number of calls to each of those service areas over the last 3 years. And they take a formula to average it out, and then they apply that percentage based on either the city or the townships that they cover, based on kind of their expenses they need to cover. So on table 2, they have their operating expenses, and then they look at their revenue and their Medicare write-off, and then the amount they get from contracts with the townships, which in the end leaves them short about $55,000. So that's with a contribution of $30,000 from the city, that leaves them short about $25,000. So then on table 4, that is where they did their fee formula calculation. So they basically took each of the 3 areas that they looked at, population, market value, and average calls, and kind of averaged them out over those 3 areas, and then applied that to the $55,150, and that's where they came up with the $30,000 from the city of Tracy, if that makes sense. Questions there? It's a lot of numbers. So with that, Eric and I talked about it a little bit. We still do have $40,000 or $60,000, excuse me, set aside in the hospital fund from the sale of the hospital that we can use for health-related initiatives. Basically, what we are recommending is we enter a 4-year contract with the ambulance for $15,000 per year. I can't talk today. I don't think I've had enough caffeine or too much. So yeah, 4-year contract for $15,000 per year. That would use up that $60,000 that we have set aside from the hospital sale. I did read through the contract with the sales contract with the hospital. We do have to kind of notify them of what we're doing. Ultimately, it's our decision at the end, but we do have to talk it over with the hospital as written in the contract. As far as a required amount that the city contributes, I know the question had come up if the ambulance will still provide service to the city if the city doesn't contribute anything or a different amount. They are legally required to provide services to the city no matter what the city contributes. Part of the EMSRB, it's the Emergency Medical Response Board. They have a certain PSA or service area, and they have to cover that no matter what. It's in their EMSRB contract. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Any questions there? I know.
One thing I want to add that you may not know is that Krista is an EMT, so she actually knows a little bit more about this than most people would. So we have a finance director who rides in an ambulance in her spare time. And so it actually has been really helpful because, you know, she has some contacts and kind of understanding how the whole thing works. It's been really helpful.
Did we do 4-year just to kind of expand out the amount of money that they're going to get each year, so we cover 4 years instead of just doing $30,000 for 2? And
basically, yeah, Eric kind of suggested the 4-year for $15,000.
It's similar to what we have been giving from an operational standpoint before. And that's why. And so you know, $15,000 a year in 4 years gets to $60,000, which is what we have left in that hospital fund. And so it's similar to the kind of contribution we've made previously. You know, the big consideration for us is, and that gets us through 4 years, and that's going to help because you might remember that some of our debt service goes down after 2026, so that gets us through 2026. You know, the challenge we have is if it doesn't come out of the hospital fund, it has to come out of the general fund. And so then all of a sudden we got to start talking about what we're going to cut. It's a real problem. So it's a unique source of money that we have that we could use, and it bridges the gap. It does honestly kick the can down the road a little bit, but ultimately it gives the ambulance similar support to what they were receiving in the past, and allows us to bridge the gap to when we might be able to have a conversation about general fund monies in the future. That's the rationale, if it makes sense.
I guess I understand the rationale, I think, but what I question is that's only half of what they are asking.
Yep.
Which would be, let's just run this in a circle here. If the fire department, we own the fire department, so we would go out to the townships and ask for X amount of dollars and say, well, nope, we're only going to give you half. How does that, am I not thinking that?
Well, yeah, certainly there's a negotiation, but every negotiation's different ultimately. There's slight differences in this case though, in that number one, as Krista already said, they're required to provide service to us no matter what. That's not necessarily true, from a township standpoint. That's more like a fee for service kind of thing. So it's slightly different. So in reality, we're not required to give this money, and it doesn't mean that they won't give us service if we don't give it to them. It's more like this is an important part of our community and we want to help and support them kind of thing.
Like you started off saying, these charts, these figures are a little confusing.
Mm-hmm.
First thing that I'm confused about that I just need a little explanation is there's a table 4, the fee formula calculation. There's a table 4A, fee formulation calculation, including rural and city. And then there's a table 5, contract fees. So right now, what are the townships? Can you tell me from these numbers, and because there's not an ambulance person here, which fees are they collecting from the townships?
I'm going to say that table 5 is likely those contracted fees that they're collecting from the townships. It looks like they charge the township $75 per section that they cover within that township. So if you look at that table 5, like Amoret, the fee per section is $75, and then they have 26 sections within Amoret Township. So it looks like they are likely contracting with them for about $19.50.
So they charge them by the section, not by the population.
That's the way it appears here.
Yeah, I know the fire contracts are by section, but I guess I'm just sitting here trying to figure out still where the whole 30,000 is coming from. Because I definitely want to support the ambulance because they are a very, very important service. But I'm just trying to justify for my vote as to the dollar amount. Because if I sit here and look at, let's just say, because we can't compare sections because the city does not have sections.
Yeah.
So let's go with population. If I look at the Chetek Township, their population, it says, is like 308. So like that's, if we would times that by 7, let's just say it would equal our population. So if I go down here to the Chetek Township, like on 4A, is it 4A I was looking at? I was trying to do this math, and of course I left my sheet.
You're looking at 5.
Well, no, I think 4A is over here.
On the right.
The formula.
Yeah, because that's like $2,194.
Yep.
I
You
think.
take that times 7, that would be close to the 15,000.
Mm-hmm. I think what they're looking at is if you look at table 4, they're taking their shortfall, the $55,000, and they're dividing it out amongst the city and all of the townships based on population, average market value, and average calls. So I think that's where they pulled that $30,000 from. Even though if you look at the look at, like, Amaret has 27.95 in that table 4, but the contract rate, is only at 19.50. But that's my best guess on where they're pulling the 30,000 from, is looking at their shortfall of 55,000.
But that's not our responsibility of a city to make up their shortfall.
It's not.
And they're kind of shortfalling every township, according to that table 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you compare table 4 to what they're actually contracting in table 5, it's quite a bit less, half in some cases.
Where we're just going down $590.
Right, this is why it's confusing because it's not clear where the 30,000 came from. It appears that it was a number that they backed into based on how much money they think they wanted to have overall, which is why we defaulted back to the idea of, okay, we've given them this kind of support in the past, and so just from a history and consistency standpoint, and because it fits pretty well with the $60,000 number, what would $15,000, how many years is that? And that's how we came up with that number, ultimately.
I honestly don't think we should be held to what the council had agreed to when they had this nice pot of money sitting there.
Yep.
Because they jumped from 14,000.
I think it went up to 28,000 a year
Yeah,
is
it's
what it was
28,000
per year.
That I do have with me, it's 28,000, but it was easy for them to make that jump because they had this pot of money that it wasn't going to affect the taxpayers at that point in time.
Yep.
I can't fathom jumping from 15 or 14. Where did I see the 14? Someone help me.
We paid 14,000 in 2016. Yep.
Okay, I was gonna say, I'm pulling that from somewhere, I know that. That was, that doubled.
Yep.
And so I think that's where it's putting an unrealistic expectation on the council of today. Because it's going to look like we don't support the ambulance because we're cutting down from that 28,000. But I don't think that 28,000 in my eyes was decided based on a contract like this. It was that they needed a new ambulance.
Yep.
They needed it.
And the city at that time had the funds
We
to be
could
able
afford
to
it and everything, but
help with
we're
that.
not in that same position today.
Yep.
I was hoping this would be a little bit more black and white, but it's not. But I don't think it can be either.
Is it ever?
Well, that's a good point, Jerry. Circumstances are different. We're not blessed with that big pot of money that was present 5 years ago. But I do think that, using the 15,000 as kind of the base amount of what the city was supporting until we had this big pot of money from the hospital transfer. I guess I would support some kind of an increase from the 15 based on increased inflation and things cost more for the ambulance. I guess I would support $20,000 a year for 3 years. That's gives the ambulance an increase from the 15 base that we were offering before the hospital fund came out.
It was 14.
Okay.
Another 1,000.
All right.
And if we did 20 for 3 years, that would get us through 22, 23, 24.
Right.
What are the rest of you guys thinking? We got 15, we've got 20,
I know.
we've got 30.
I was kind of thinking on yours.
I'm just glad
The same
the
thing you
city
were.
of Tracy doesn't own the ambulance, or the EMTs service. Oh, I'm talking lots of bucks. We're very fortunate, very, very fortunate.
Absolutely, yeah.
I wouldn't even begin to think how much it would cost us. You look at the fire department, the police department, and now if we would have the ambulance department, oh mercy. We're fortunate that it's private.
I can speak to Cottonwood. Cottonwood City owns the ambulance, and I don't know much about the financial side of things, but they do not contract with any of our service areas. So any of the townships we cover, we don't contract with that. The only revenue we receive is from billing out patients.
And that's
For
what
our
I
service.
mean, because I've talked to a couple other private ambulances, and they don't get any support from the townships or from the city either. What they told me is, we would love to get something from from the city and that, but it's our business. We decide to own that business, like a grocery store.
Yep.
They decide to own the grocery store, provide the service to the community. They set their prices. It's their business. They have to meet their bottom line. But both of them said, but we would be happy if the city would give us money. And it's like, well, I totally understand that. But they figure it's their business.
I like the 15 too, because then it gets us through to where we may be in a better financial position 4 years from now. Do we give them nothing, or do we have all of a sudden another pot of money that we can start digging into? So I think that it helps everybody. It kind of spaces out the money and provides as much assistance as we can currently.
20,000, oh, that's 3 years. You're talking 15 at how many years is it?
4.
4.
Do we have to do a motion on this tonight, or what's the...
I mean, ultimately, there's two things that are going to come back. You don't have to do a motion tonight. I'd like to get an idea of get direction on, because we're going to have you vote on a contract ultimately with the ambulance, and then we'll need to, when we bring back the final budget, we'll include the number, in the final budget as well. So I would like to know, what you would like generally. And so you could do a motion and say, this is what we support, kind of thing, and then that would give us direction to move forward. Or you could just kind of, I hear a couple different ideas, so if you feel like you need to vote in order to get some clarity, I think that's good. If not, if there's a consensus around one thing, you wouldn't need to vote necessarily, because you're going to vote at least twice.
I like the 4 and 15 personally.
Well, and I was leaning towards the 4-year 15. I mean, Seth made a really good point as far as the inflation thing. But as a city, to be able to get us to the point where we're out of the debt and we're going to be able to maybe do more after that.
And I would task the ambulance to remind the council when they go to renew after this contract, after we do, I would task them to say if we do what Pam just said, to do the 4 years, where till we get in a little better financial situation, and to be able to then reevaluate. I mean, that's what you do when you re-sign a contract anyways. But I would task the ambulance to say, the council at that time, because I don't know if any of us will still be here in 4 years. It could be a total new council. So I'm saying, I'm tasking the ambulance, because they're going to be the same organization, to say the council at the time said that they would, look at it differently, that they did a 4-year because of their financial situation.
We can put that in a resolution that approves the contract too, and then that way that would be, in the whereases, and there would be some documentation on it from the council meeting too, so that people can remember it. That's the reason why we do those things ultimately.
Yeah, because I'm torn right now, between the 15
I know,
and the 20,
and
because you
they're
made a
both
very
good
good point
points.
with the 20. But I would want it to be that the ambulance had some reassurance that when the city was in a different financial situation, we could relook at it, and we could include it if we have to into our budget as a contract that we're going to have every year, that we just have to budget for it. You know, right now, we haven't budgeted for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, for 5 years. Yep.
Yeah, we're seeing some 4 years too, though.
I know, but that's why I would want this to stay on the radar. Because, yeah, other things are going to come up, and I don't want the ambulance to get pushed to the back corner because of the other things that came up. Because it is a very valuable service that we need to keep locally here.
So ultimately, I mean, I hear three people saying 4 at 15. One suggestion was 3 at 20. What's your pleasure, council?
Well, I'm gonna go with 20. I'm sorry, I can't see the 3 and 4 years here. I just, we're just speculating that we're gonna be in good shape after 4 years and good shape after 3 years. So I just can't see it. Sorry.
No, don't apologize.
No, I'm just saying I can't, we're using years here, 3 years or 4 years. Is there any guarantee we're gonna have a pot of money at the end of 4 years or 3 years? So, I don't know. I just.
So we've got 3 and 2.
I'll go with 4 years at 15 too.
What do you think, George?
Well, I don't know. It's a very valuable thing we have here in the city, and I
It is a valuable
don't like the thought that we didn't even budget any money for them. We're just taking money that's sitting somewhere. You know, why didn't we budget $5,000 a year for them, and then use this money to help get us through? We give money to, and don't take this wrong, we give money to this organization or the Wheels Across the Prairie or this place, that place. Well, they're not businesses, so I don't know how to take all that either. But if we're going to be donating money away or giving money away, we need to be giving something to the ambulance that costs the city something, not just some pot of money sitting there. So I don't know, I've been trying to be quiet and think about this quite a bit, and that's hard for me. But I think we need to budget some money ourselves for this program and using the 60,000 to help so we don't have to budget too much. Whether it be 5,000 or 4,000 or something, I think we should have physically budgeted something for the ambulance.
We should have, and they didn't.
But we can move
still-
it forward. We don't have to
But
wait the
we-
4 years to
but
put
we-
something in our budget.
Yeah, we can do that.
We can
going
start doing
forward.
that before we would go through the $60,000 and then be sitting at a meeting saying, now we have no money. I mean, we could start putting something in a budget next year's budget's pretty done. But the following year, we would still have
Budgeting for it.
either 2 or 3 years to be putting money aside for when the contract comes due.
Maybe we can budget a little money in there, like a little bit to go in with, you know what I mean? To go in with it, if we had to.
But I don't know if we can this year.
No, not this year, but I mean going forward.
We knew about this a while ago before we did the budget or whatever. So we could have been, if we had been talking about this 3 months ago when it first came up, we could have had it in there. But we didn't, we just sat on our hands.
Well, I think the thought is this pot of money, that we would have that for the payment, or the contract, or donation, or the whatever word you want to use.
I guess I'm probably going to get in a lot of trouble for this, but I'm perfectly good at budgeting or using 20,000 a year, using the 60 and then the city putting in the rest for 4 years or whatever, so it costs us a little bit more money, but am I making sense? No?
You're saying 20 for 4 years, so that'd be
Yes.
80 total.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
So we'd have to come up with
Another
20.
20. Yeah, I got you.
That way, no, we're not really given what they're asking, but yet we're doing a little bit more somehow.
So I hear 3 people say 4 years at 15, 2 people say 3 years at 20, and 1 person saying 4 years at 20. So maybe there should be a vote, Mayor, just to
So
be clear.
is it something that we can do if we did the 4 years at 15 and then put it in the budget to give them a little extra in the next coming years?
We could, a couple of thoughts. The short answer is yes, we could certainly do that. The issue is that you could reserve a certain amount of money in the budget every year, for that, but ultimately it can be unreserved by city council. And so that's just on your kind of goodwill, I guess you could say. If you really wanted to make sure that you gave extra, George's proposal is probably the right one, where it's 4 years and then you have to do 20 and then you save a little bit and then that's how you make the last year's payment, that kind of thing. And so if that's what your intent was, it would be better to include that in the contract. But that would be my suggestion if you wanted to go in that direction.
Then we're not going to be saving anything up for when this hospital fund is gone. Then it's going to hit us 20,000 or more
Right.
because of inflation and everything.
Right. And so that's
all going to hit. Then we're not going to have a little pot of money that we as a city put aside.
That's right.
That's what, before we had this hospital fund, that's what the city did every year. They budgeted that approximately $14,000.
Right. And that came out of essentially that year's taxes. I mean, and I'm going to be really candid with you. The city has, in recent years, not been good at saving money for future projects.
Yeah.
And so, ideally for equipment, we should be, having an equipment replacement fund. You put a little bit of money away every year, but that hasn't happened in recent years. And so, it would be, the most likely scenario would be that, you get to the end of the contract and then you'd have another $20,000 you'd have to pick up basically from the general fund in year 4. And that's okay, you could do that. I mean, that's your all's choice, but ultimately that's probably what would happen if we're being really honest about it.
So do we look at splitting hairs here a little bit?
I just did
If
the
we
same
go to
thing.
17,500, we're in between the 15 and the 20, and we go for 4 years, that would be 70,000, so we would still need to be
10,000.
saving some, but it would jump all of a sudden to that 20. It would give us 3 years to save up $10,000, which we could definitely include that in a budget. And even more, so that we would still have a little pot that we could not steal from. Use.
We should just budget
Yeah.
14, 15 every year, whatever, try to just add it up.
1750
So I'm
makes it
good at
maybe
1750.
a little better than the 15 from the 14.
Honestly, I don't know. I
You
haven't
got
seen
multiple
financials for so long.
I'm sorry, what were you saying, Ron?
I just was asking, she said that Cotton would own their own, and we asked her what they pay out a year to own that business.
I don't even know. I haven't seen the financials for a while.
But we can't look at it that, Ron, because it's a business that is owned by this.
No, I know that. Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to more or less make it so that they have no expense, that we're going to cover all their additional expenses above what Medicare pays, because Medicare doesn't pay very well. That's more or less supporting their business, and we can't get into that.
Well, Jerry, if you wanted to forward a motion for 17.5 over 4 years as a compromise measure to bridge the differences we have, I would support that.
Well, I'll make the motion, because it'll either die or
Make the
pass.
motion, please.
I'll make the motion that we go into a contract for $17,500 a year for 4 years with the Tracy ambulance.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Koopman,
No.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Teigs,
No.
Tao,
Yes.
Shones,
Yes.
Landay.
Yes.
And Mayor Coleman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, council. We appreciate it. We will ultimately work with the ambulance and bring back a contract. There'll be another vote on that, formally approve the contract a little bit later.
But then will you make a note so that we do start annually budgeting money?
For a little bit of money to set aside, yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we have on our staff reports, Mayor. The next item says closed meeting, but I think that's actually on the agenda twice.
Oh.
It's actually at the
I was
end.
gonna ask that before you approved it, and I forgot.
No, it's our fault, because we moved it up. Normally we do it at the end. We moved it
Yeah.
up last week and probably didn't change the previous one. So we're ready for new business.
I guess I got a question, and I'm rolling back into this ambulance thing, but when we budget, then are we gonna be budgeting the 17.5 so we
Yes.
can build this kitty up?
We'll budget, what we would have to do, because it's 70,000, is ideally we'd want to, and we'll have to talk about the mechanics of this, but if you really wanted to do it, you'd want to budget the extra $10,000 over a 3-year period, so then you had the extra that you needed at the end. So you would budget 17.5 plus 33.33, and then that would get you the savings. Essentially what we would have to do is restrict 33 and 33 cents a year for the next 3 years in the general fund for the purposes of the ambulance, and we would just roll that general fund balance every year. That's how the mechanics of it would work. That's probably more technical than what you wanted, but the short answer is yes. That's what we would do. We'd budget more money than the 17.5 a year so that we had extra at the end.
Sorry about that.
You're fine.
That's okay. You made me do math in my head. Chris is not the only one that can do that.
Okay.
Okay, we move on to new business.
So the first one is a resolution establishing the polling place, which we're required to do for 2022. So it's fairly straightforward. It's always been here at the VMC, and it still is.
Motion to approve resolution 2021-103.
Second.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call.
Shones,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Teigs,
Aye.
Koopman,
Yes.
Landay,
Aye.
Mayor Coleman.
Aye.
The last 4 items Shane's going to come up and talk about. There's just a bunch of pay apps and grant and work at the airport.
Which one's first?
Pay apps.
RNG, yep.
Pay up 7. This is just a monthly progress pay app. I don't know if you had any questions on what was done.
Is there one more this year then?
There, yeah, likely so.
Okay.
This was through Let's see, application date through October 22nd, so it'll be a little bit after that. Say not a whole lot, mostly sodding.
Motion to approve resolution 2021-104.
I'll second.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Landay,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Teigs,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Towle,
Aye.
Koopman,
Yes.
Mayor Corman.
Aye.
Change order number 2.
All right, so we have change order number 2 for phase 3A2. What it boils down to, most of this is for asbestos cement pipe that was found during the project. There's obviously, as I mentioned before, none of this area was really mapped. So there's asbestos that was found. One was actually abandoned, but it was in, they abandoned it in place in a prior project years ago. And they had to put, I couldn't remember if this, I think it's a new water main, had to go there because there was conflicts with the storm sewer and sewer. There was another block that had to come out, but so that pretty much makes up for $67,375 of it. And then there's some small items. There's a water service change to I think that was a fourplex on 5th Street. Instead of 4 individual 1 inches, they just had a 1 2-inch line to that property. That was $2,560. And then there's a storm sewer connection for the St. Mary's School that wasn't known. There was no manhole to it before. It was just connected to the line under the street, so they had to add a manhole to make that connection because it was an 8-inch pipe. So that was a $5,570 addition there. So, do you have any questions on any of that?
So the total is the 75,505. Is that right?
Yes. I'll go over that one here. Yeah, 75,505 even.
And all that work's done already, correct?
Correct.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2021-105.
Second.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Towle,
Aye.
Landay,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Teigs,
Aye.
Koopman,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Corman.
Aye.
All right, so the ARPA grant offer, these funds, this is a grant offer from the FAA, and they're to be used for costs related to operations, personnel, cleaning, sanitation, janitorial services, and for combating the spread of pathogens at the airport, and then debt service payments, which we don't have any that would apply to that. So it's very similar to we had SURSA money here earlier in the year. That was $9,000. This is an additional $22,000. If we can't find anything to use it on as far as the project goes, we could still use it on M&O. So it's free money to use if we can find something to use it on. So, but do you have any questions on that?
So we're getting money to do.
Yep.
I like this.
But very limited on what you can use it on.
Right.
That's where the tricky part comes in.
But if we don't use it, it just goes back to them.
We're not out anything, so it's just it's a grant. It's a contract with the FAA, so
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2021-106.
First and second, any further discussion on that?
We can't use any of this money for the hangars, can we?
no, unfortunately.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Jones,
Aye.
Koopman,
Yes.
Teigs,
Aye.
Towle,
Aye.
Landine,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Mayor Carmen.
Aye.
The last one, there's just one left, right?
Mm-hmm.
M&O agreement. This is every 2 years we have an agreement with the FAA, or not the FAA, MnDOT Aeronautics to maintain the airport. It's 75-25 grant. Pretty much what we rely on to keep the airport running. They cover labor costs for mowing, electrical, water, sewer, pretty much all your utilities, and the man hours it takes to fix lights, move snow. They cover 75% of that labor cost, so it's pretty much the same amount that it's been in the past. So every 2 years you'll see this one come about. So
You said we're at about the same dollar amount?
yeah, it's about 28,000 roughly, and some change every year. It'd be for every year. So.
Somebody want to jump at the chance here on this one?
I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2021-107.
Second.
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Landine,
Yes.
Deeds,
Aye.
Whitman,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Powell,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Carmen.
Aye. So, do we have a motion to close the regular meeting and open the closed meeting?
Sure, I'll make that motion.
First and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So what do we need?
Stop doing your
Mr. Carpenter. Jeff Carpenter.
Okay.
For that